Hello and welcome to this recording on implementing a secure Jenkins DevOps pipeline with Sophos Cloud Optix. So this is a concept that some of you may be familiar with. It's called DevSecOps, and this is where we begin to shift a lot of the security processes that typically happens at the end of our implementation and typically when security functions as a gating mechanism. So we begin to take a lot of those security processes, begin to shift them to the left, and that's for an organization that's adopting DevOps principles. And as part of this, so the whole goal will be about empowering our developers and DevOps team to work in a much more secure way. And the best way to do that is to integrate with the existing tools and the existing processes, tools that they're already familiar with, tools that they're already used to, such as Jenkins. So a quick disclaimer before proceeding. So this is not a video on best practices for designing a Jenkins DevOps pipeline. So in order for me to make some key points in this video and avoiding confusion in the process, what I'll do is I'll try to steer clear of certain complexities. So I've kept this video very simple. So if I have the time, I might get deeper into Jenkins, into DevOps, into DevSecOps in other videos, and I may release at later date. But for this particular video, keep it simple. How do we implement a secure Jenkins DevOps pipeline with Sophos Cloud Optix? Giving you an example of that you can build on. So first, some quick information around the prerequisites that are needed for this. So um, if I go back here, you need a Sophos Cloud Optix account, an AWS account, a GitHub account, and a Jenkins server. So which is what you see on the screen here. So an AWS account, Sophos Cloud Optix, Jenkins account, and a GitHub server. And just to emphasize that the main aspects that I'll be focusing on today will be these aspects over here. So let me put that in a nice box. So I'll be focusing on this aspect over here. So the other aspect of Visual Studio Code, I won't be dealing with that. Again, that for another video. So once you have those prerequisites in place, the next thing that I'll be doing is we need to install certain plugins on our Jenkins server. Now, plugins for Jenkins is a way to kind of like extend it to integrate with different other parts of our environment. So there could be AWS plugins, Azure plugins, Google Cloud plugins, and many other types of plugins that allows integration. For this particular use case, I won't actually be using any plugins, but what I'll need is I'll need to install certain command line tools on the Jenkins server. And there are two main command line tools that I'll need to install, which will be the AWS CLI, and I'll also need to install JQ2, which I'll be using for formatting some JSON replies that I'll be getting back from API calls to Sophos Cloud Optix. So I'll need those two tools installed. Now, what I'll do is I'll go to the SSH terminal of my Jenkins server to do this. Now, I already have that open. So if I clear the screen, and if I do an apt-get install AWS CLI, it's already installed. But if it's not installed for you, just proceed to type yes, to accept the terms and conditions, and then proceed to do the installation. To install JQ, if I do apt-get install JQ, and again, if I don't have it installed, it will go ahead and go through the process of installing JQ. So that's step number one completed. So let's go to step number two, which is we need to create an access key ID and a secret access key in AWS. And the main reason for this is because Jenkins, we're going to be using that to trigger the build of our CloudFormation template in AWS. And we're going to need the credentials to be able to do that. So that's the credential that we'll need to create. So what I'll do is I'll go to my AWS environment and I'll sign in with my password and MFA over here very quickly. Let's get MFA ready. Let's go for that. So submit. And that should sign me into my AWS environment. So I'm already under IAM, but if not, I can just go under IAM over here. And what I'll do is I'll go create a new user. And for my new user, I'll call my user, let's call the user, let's copy this, Jenkins AWS cred, keep it very simple. I'm only going to be using this for programmatic access, so there's no need to enable the console access. I'll go ahead and go to permissions. And in this use case, again, let's keep things simple. I'll just attach existing policies directly, and I'll give this particular user account administrator access, which is can do everything basically. And I'll go ahead and click next to tags and next to review. And if I click on create user, that creates the user. But then I can also see the access key ID. So what I'll do is I'll make a note of this access key ID because I'll need that for later. So let's make a note of that. And by the way, you could also just download the CSV and that will contain the access key ID and the secret access key. What I'll do is I'll just move this off screen so I can copy my secret access key. So let's go to copy that and let's go back over here. There we go. So now I have my access key ID and my secret access key. So let's move to the next step. So next step, I'll add the AWS Access Key ID and the secret access key as global credentials in Jenkins. So that's the next step to do. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to go back to Jenkins and I'll need to go add the credentials I just created into Jenkins so that I can make use of that. So to do that, if I go to my Jenkins server, which I already have the tunnel open to that, and I'll just click on the dashboard to refresh that. I'll click on login to log into my Jenkins server. And again, let's keep things very, very simple here. So what I'll do is I'll go on the credentials and the dashboard and I'll go to under credentials. Let's see, I have a few credentials there already. So I'll go to add credentials over here. So the credential I'll be adding will be a secret text. And in this case, I'll be adding my access key ID first of all. So that's the first thing that I'll do. So let's go to that. So the secret will be my access key ID that I copied earlier. So that's the access key ID. Remember, not the secret access key, the access key ID. So it's going to ask to give it a name. I'll call it the access key ID. The description, I'll give it that same description. And AWS Access Key ID Access Key ID. Nice. I'll click OK to that. I'll go ahead and add another credential. And this time around, I'll also select secret text. But this time around, I'll be adding the secret access key. So ID, secret access key, and description, I'll call that AWS secret access key. So let's add that. I'll get the value of the key in the downloaded CSV file, and I'll paste that and I'll click OK to that. So that's done. I have my access key, ID, and secret access key in Jenkins now. So great. Let's move on. So the next thing that I'll say is that you need a GitHub repo that contains your CloudFormation templates. So I recommend you do this with your production templates that your developers and your DevOps teams or whatever repo that you're using in production. I recommend you do this with this particular one. Now for sample, I have a CloudFormation template hosted here. So actually, if I go bring up that GitHub repo over here, so here's this GitHub repo, and you can see that it contains a single file, which is a CloudFormation template file, which contains the code for my infrastructure that I need to build in AWS. Now, if you are not going to be using your own production repo or whatever, or your own test repo that contains your template, you can just create a clone of this. But you need that. So what I'll show you is that what I currently have here is I have this JSON template, my CloudFormation template, but I also have security and compliance issues built into this. So I have that intentionally because it's going to make the point that I'm going to be making. So once I have that, let's go to the process. So the process that I will go to next, if I go down here, is I will go to create stuff like a Jenkins pipeline. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go to Jenkins over here and I'm going to set up a pipeline that's going to build, it's going to take this template in from this GitHub repo, and it's going to use it to trigger a cloud formation job in AWS that will build my infrastructure for me. But remember that the template that I'm using in this case has security and compliance issues built into it. But the sad thing is, because security is not baked into this process, this template will go to Jenkins once I have the pipeline all built correctly, and it will be triggered successfully. And I will end up with insecure or resources that are configured insecurely in production. And again, that leaves me open to security threats and attack. So let's go do that. Enough talking. So let's go set up the Jenkins pipeline. So let's go back to the Jenkins server now, and let's go back to the main dashboard area. And to do that, there are a few steps that I will need to do. I will just, let's go to, so first thing I'll do is I'll need to create a new item. I can click on create new job here. So if I click on new item, it's the same. So give it a name. So what I'll call is I'll call this my AWS production deployment. I'll make it a freestyle project and I'll click OK to that. So that creates my project. So the first thing that I'll need to do is I'll need to add my source code management, which is my GitHub repo, where Jenkins will be grabbing the template from. So I'll go on the source code management and I'll go get the URL for my source code management. So I'll specify Git because that's what I'm using. I'll put in my repo URL there. Now for credentials, I'll set that to none. Again, I'm not showing you best practices, so it's good, but for now, I'll just set that to none. Branches to build. I'm building the master branch for this one. So if I go back to my Optix, sorry, to my GitHub account, you can see this is the master branch. So that's what I'm specifying there. So once I have that, I'm done with the source code management. So the next thing that I'll need to do is I'll need to go on the build environment and I'll need to go configure the build environment. And this is where I'll need to add the AWS credentials. So what I'll do is I'll select use secret text of house and I'll add certain bindings. So I'll add my secret text binding. So let's give the variable a name, the AWS underscore access underscore key underscore ID. And I'm going to specify the credentials that I added earlier. So in this case, I specify my credentials and that's the access key ID. So I'll go to add another binding. So another secret text. And this time around for the AWS secret access key. So again, that's AWS underscore secret underscore access underscore key. And I'll specify this time around my secret access key, which is the credential that I added earlier. So once I have this two all set, that's done for the build environment. So I'm going to move over to the general section, which is where I'll configure certain parameters that I'll be passing to the AWS CloudFormation template. So to do that under the general section here, I'll select the option for this project is parameterized. So I'll go ahead and select that option and I'll go ahead and add a parameter. I'll add a string parameter. In this case, I want to add a parameter for my default AWS region. So I'm going to give it a name of AWS underscore default underscore region. And the value I'm going to be using EU West, which is the London region. And I'm going to specify the description for that. So AWS default region, and that's the only parameter that I need to add. So that's all good now. So we've configured source code management, build environment, and general. And now I'm going to go on the build, which is where I begin to specify what the pipeline will look like on the build. So let's go add the build step. So add the build step, and I'm going to click on execute shell. And here's what I'm going to be adding here. It's a very, very simple command line, which is I'm going to be building so let's go at that. If I paste that in there. And by the way, so all these I'll put in a document somewhere that I'm going to post in the description. So here's the command of what I'm adding without going into too much details. I'm building the AWS CloudFormation template because Jenkins is going to be taking a clone of this GitHub repo. I'm just specifying the file name. I'm saying build using this file. and I'm specifying things like the AMI parameter value, which again I can just pass in as a parameter, but just to keep things again simple, and I'm passing in certain parameters to that. So essentially, it's just a single shell script in Jenkins that will take whatever template that I have in this GitHub repo, which I've specified, that particular template, and it's going to use that to trigger a build in AWS. So that's what that particular code is doing. And the main reason why I'm doing this is to show you that once I have that in there and I click save, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger a build here. So I'm going to click on build with parameters, and I'm going to go ahead and click on build here. So but before I click on build, what I'll do is I'll click over here and I'll go under services and I'll change this to CloudFormation service. So CloudFormation service, you can see that I currently have no stack. I need to change this location to EU London. Let's make sure that I have no stack that's been, yep, so I currently have no stacks. So, but what I'm going to do is once I trigger this build, you're going to see that Jenkins is going to take my template and use it to trigger a build in AWS. So let's go ahead and click on build, and I can monitor what that looks like over here. And you can see that it's giving me the information about, hi David, it's successful. So that means it's successfully triggered my build. If I go to CloudFormation Stack and I refresh it, you can see I have my AWS pipeline workload and the build has started. So that's good. But here's the problem with that. The problem with that is the templates that I'm using contain security and compliance issues. And now I've successfully triggered that, and that's going into production. So in other words, this is what I'm going to end up with, which is not good. So let's show you what I'm going to end up with here. I'm going to end up with a situation like this. So let's go back. This is what I'll end up with. I'll end up with situations where I have a Lambda function that's configured insecurely, S3 buckets that are configured insecurely, multiple EC2 instances that are configured insecurely. And I will show you some of this, but not everything. But that's bad because that's now in production. So what I'll do is I'll let the build finish on AWS. I'll pause the recording. So once the build is finished, I'll resume the recording. And then what I'll show you is how to build security into this. So what I'll show you once I resume the recording is how do I begin to turn this process around into something that's much better, where I can have this. So let's go back. This is what I want. What I want is a process. So let's get rid of the numbers. Da, da, done, done, done. Excellent. So what I actually want is a process of before this build happens, it's going to be sent to Sophos Cloud Optix, which is going to assess this template, and it's going to send an information back to Jenkins to let Jenkins know if this template has critical or high security or compliance violations in it. And if that's the case, then I would use that to add an extra step where if there are security issues in my template, that stops the pipeline. That does not go into production because there's security issues that's been detected. But if this template was assessed and everything looks good, then it's going to be a green sign to say, go ahead and deploy this. So let's go back to that. Let's see how my template is doing. And let's do a quick refresh. So it's still creating in creation in progress. So what I'll do is I'll pause the recording and I'll come back once it's finished. So welcome back. So my template's created successfully. So that's good and not good. So the reason why that's not good is I'll just show you an example of what I explained earlier, which is I have a bunch of insecurely or a bunch of resources in AWS that are not configured securely. So if I go back to this and if I go to on the output, you can see I've got, let's just do, let's go on the resources, and you can see I have a bunch of resources that were created, lots of them. And I will not show you everything, but if I go on the services and I go on the S3, you see that I have a bunch of S3 buckets that are public and all that stuff. So that's not good. So let's go try to fix that. So what I'll do is I'll go back to CloudFormation just to keep things again very simple. And I'm going to delete this stack, which will delete all the resources that I just created. So that's good. So let's go to the next step of this process. So the next step of this process is let's begin to integrate security into this. And I'm going to do that by adding two steps to my pipeline. And here's what these two steps will look like. Hello, Mr. Jenkins. Before you actually go start triggering build in AWS, I want you to integrate with Optix to do a security and compliance assessment of this template. If security issues was were to be detected with this template, remember that this is not only AWS CloudFormation, this could be an Azure Ham template, this could be a Terraform template. This build does not progress. That stops the pipeline, and we're going to be able to see the message. But if this template were to be clean and tidy, so let's get something much more nicer without the skull symbol. So let's say this template were to be clean and nice, and no security and compliance issues, or no particularly critical security and compliance issues were to be detected. The situation changes, because what the situation will be like, it will still be accessed by Sophos Cloud Optix. Sophos Cloud Optix will assess it and let Jenkins know, yeah, there are no critical or high security or compliance alerts with this particular template. And in that case, rather than getting a deny, we're gonna progress with this, and we can get this one out. So I hope that makes sense to you, and then that's gonna be able to progress. So let's go do that configuration. So for me to do that, there's two main things that I need to do. There, I just need to add two steps to this build. So I'll go to under Optix, under my Jenkins pipeline. If I go back to under my project, and I'll go under configure, and I'll go under build. And in this case, I'll add an extra build step, execute shell. And I'll drag this all the way from the beginning, from the end, I'll drag this to the beginning. So what would I put in the shell window? So there are two things that I'm going to put. Number one is I'll go to my Optix account, my Sophos Cloud Optix account here. If I go under settings, if I go under environment, I can add a new environment. And if I go under infrastructure as code, this is where I can go to get the code to add this into my Jenkins pipeline. So I can copy this code here, I can copy that. I can go over here and I can add this. So what that does is it's going to trigger like the assessment with Sophos Cloud Optix, but that's just step number one. There's another step that I need to do here. Here's the other step that I need to do. The other step that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be saying to Optix. So let's get this one. Let's scroll forward, and I want to post this code here so I can do a quick review together with you. And here's what I'm doing here with this. What I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, after you've done the assessment with Optix, Jenkins, I also want you to reach out to Optix and verify for this particular GitHub repo and the templates that it contains. I want you to verify there any high or critical security or compliance alerts for this particular template. And then I pipe that into JQ to obtain how many response it got back. If the response is 0, that means no high severity alerts detected, which means I can proceed with the pipeline. But if security issues were detected, exit. Pipeline does not proceed. So this is the next part that I'll need to go add to that pipeline. So there are two steps, the assessment and then the evaluation for when to proceed, when to stop. So I'm going to add that. So I've got those two steps over there. So the other thing that I'll just do is, because this is going to be using the bash shell in the backend, so I'll just add the shebang over here. So let's close that. So I have the shebang and all that looks good to me. So that's fine. So once I have these two steps now, then what I can do is I can go ahead and I can save my step. But before I go ahead and trigger a build again, I'll just go verify in AWS that my CloudFormation template is indeed deleted. So now I don't have any other templates that's going on here. So that's good. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to go trigger my build again. And if I go to trigger my build, and if I go to have a look at the response, let's see what's going on, and that's a failure. Now that's interesting. If I want you to see what the failure is, essentially it's gone through the process, but now before sending it to AWS, it's doing an assessment with Optix, it's getting the reply back, and yeah, it's like, listen, there are high severity alerts that were detected with that template, and that stops the build in its tracks. And to verify that, if I go to my Optix environment, if I go on the environment over here, if I go on the high AC environment, I can see, so that's my um, Git path. That's my Git paths that Optix assess, and you can see that that's active. And if I go under alerts, and if I filter this alert for only infrastructure as code alerts, and I click OK to that, you can see that it's assessing my template security and compliance issue. It found the S3 buckets that were exposed to the public, and that's marked as a high alert, but there are also medium and low alerts that were detected. So, and yes, Optics doing the assessment and then integrating that with the Jenkins pipeline. So that's excellent. So now the pipeline is not going ahead. And to prove to you that what I'll do next, which is where I'll end the recording, is I'll go to Git and I'll go to clean up this template. So I'll remove the high alert that was detected. I'll fix it. So that once I fix it, this process can go through. This time around, it will only allow a clean template to be deployed into production. So no unclean template will be allowed to be deployed into production. So let's get a quick um, copy of something like that, and that's what will happen. So let's go do a quick cleanup on that. So if I go to my GitHub, if I go to my CloudFormation template, and I will just edit this directly over here. So if I go ahead and click edit this file, if I go to my S3 bucket, so you can see that I have that set to public read. I'll change that to private. And this one is already set to private, but I have a policy that allows everything. So I'll go remove that particular policy, delete, and that's good. So once I have this cleaned up, at least the high alert is cleaned up, there's still low and medium alerts. But if I go ahead and commit this, and now I've committed these changes into this template. So what I'll go now is I'll go back to Jenkins, and I'll go back and I'll go to trigger my build again. So the builds that failed initially because they were high severity alerts detected, because that was the condition that I had in there. Let's go do the build again. So let's go to back to project, build with parameters, using the default parameter again. Let's go trigger a build, and this time around, let's go see in progress, it says, and look at that. And if I go to CloudFormation, now my build is started and everything looks good. Now, because what happened is that if I go back to this, again, it sent it to Optix. Optix assessed it, and Optix returned and said there are no high severity alerts detected. Now the pipeline can proceed. And the good thing about that also is if I go back to Optix, I'll be able to see all those information. So remember that there was a high level alert that I fixed in Git now. If I go to refresh that and I specify infrastructure as code, you notice that Optix has detected that the high level alert has been resolved, right? And then there's only medium and low level alert. And again, I can add the condition to my hat content. So I hope that this has given you some really useful information on implementing DevSecOps with Sophos Cloud Optix with your Jenkins pipeline. So I like this particular screenshot I created, which is a much more matured way of implementing this, which is if your developer or DevOps team merge a code into Git, security assessment becomes a normal part of the process using Sophos Cloud Optix. So check out the solution. Let me know what you think in the description below. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my very next video. Thanks. Bye.